Hey guys, in today's episode, I'll be reviewing the Fuji 16-80 f4 lens. I feel like there are a lot of great reviews on this lens out there already, and I'm not sure I have anything amazing to add, but the most asked question I have right now when it comes to gear is what my thoughts are on this lens. If you're wondering which Fuji zoom lens makes the most sense for you, I would point you though to my Fuji zoom lens calculator, which might make the decision simpler. You'll find a link to that video and calculator in the description. For the past few weeks though, we've done a lot of traveling, including a week-long family holiday trip to Oahu. And while I've had this 16-80 f4 lens for a few months now, I wanted to wait to share my thoughts about it with you until after that trip, because I knew it would be my best chance for me to really put it through its paces. So I'd say that maybe 75% of the photos I took and 90% of the video that I took on that trip were shot with this lens. So let's cut to the chase and give you my too long didn't watch review. Simply said, this lens, while certainly not perfect, is my new top recommended Fuji travel and hybrid zoom lens. If you need the very best lens you can find for decent image quality, ultimate flexibility, great stability, durability, and usability, this is your lens. However, if you're on more of a budget, or if you can't compromise on image quality, for more professional work or whatever, then I'd probably point you to some other options. But let's get down to the nitty-gritty of why. As I said, I absolutely loved using this lens on the trip, and I rarely felt the need to take it off the camera body and replace it with anything else, although I did have a number of other primes and zooms with me to choose from. And although I also had this guy, the 18-55 2/8 f4 with me, as I stated in the past, it has absolutely been my favorite travel zoom lens. I can confidently state that I now prefer the 16-80 for travel. The first and most obvious reason that I love this lens is for the flexible zoom range. Now, virtually every single major modern camera brand and system has a 24-105-ish equivalent, full frame equivalent zoom lens at the f4 aperture. It's become the zoom standard in the modern photography as far as zoom lenses. It's sort of the all-purpose zoom lens, jack of all trades, master of none. It's actually surprising me that Fuji has waited this long to come out with such a standard lens. In fact, I'm shooting on the Lumix S1H right now with the 24-105 zoom lens on that, and it's also like the only lens that I own for that camera, and really the only lens you need if you're doing all-purpose video and photo work. What's surprising to me is that it took Fuji so long to come out with such a standard lens. But the thing about these 24-105 standard zoom lenses is that they are nearly always imperfect, or even more imperfect than what you might expect with a prime or a more specialized zoom. Having that kind of zoom range and a fixed f4 aperture usually includes compromises. And the place you often see those compromises the most are in sharpness and contrast and in vignetting, especially at the wide end. But it can be at varying places in the zoom range and certain apertures. Though there is little to no consistency between the various brands when it comes to that. And the 16-80 f4 is certainly no exception here. I haven't done my own scientific sharpness tests here, as plenty of other reviewers have done that. And while you do see variation in the reviews, there are certainly patterns. Overall, most people tend to agree that the lens is generally sharpest at 5.6, and that things start to get soft after f11 and wide open, of course. It also generally appears sharpest between the 24mm and the 60mm zoom lengths, about, with the extreme wide end and the extreme tele side being softer. You also experience more vignetting at the wide end. Now for me and the way that I use this lens, again as an all-purpose travel lens, this lens did everything I needed it to, and I never looked back at any of the images and felt like it was softer than it should have been. But if you are looking at this lens to do serious landscape or architecture work, it's probably not the one that I'd recommend. You'll probably get more consistency and higher image quality out of something like the 16-55 2.8 lens. As far as fit and finish, this lens really feels great and looks great. While it is a little bit larger than the 18-55 2.8 to f4, it's actually not much heavier. The 3 rings feel great, and if you followed me for a while, you know that I'm a little bit of an aperture ring snob. It's one of the things I love most about Fuji is using a nice feeling aperture ring, and the 16-80 has a really great feeling aperture ring. Maybe a little on the stiff end, but that's better than too loose, certainly. And it's a lot better than the smallish and aperture by wire 18-55 lens. This one doesn't have the numbered aperture like the 16-80 does, and so for that I really like this lens more. The other thing this lens has that the 18-55 doesn't is weather resistance, which is pretty important in my book. Of course, you wouldn't want to drop it into the drink and be an irresponsible camera owner. Don't take unnecessary risks and all that. But when it comes to a bit of rain, dust, or splashing, it's nice to have the reassurance of weather resistance. As far as optical image stabilization, this lens represents Fuji's very best OIS system so far. Fuji claims it will give you 6 stops of OIS, and while I haven't tested that scientifically, I can tell you that it beats all of Fuji's other mid to tele zoom lenses when it comes to OIS. And for almost the entirety of this trip, I shot with shutter speeds of much slower than I normally would. Usually my shutter speed was around 1/20th or even lower, all across the zoom range. And the reason I do this is because I want to move between photo and video extremely quickly and use an ND filter for video. To be able to move quickly, I need to use as many common settings as possible between photo and video, so I try to keep the shutter speeds between a 60th and a 1/20th, depending on my video frame rate. More on that in a different video, but suffice to say, my shutter speeds would be lower than what I normally would shoot with, even in bright sun, and I had no problem with getting sharp photos out of this lens. And even in really low light conditions where normally I'd prefer to use a 1.4 or 1.2 aperture lens, by bringing the shutter speed down to 1/60th or 1/30th even, I was able to control the noise and still grab sharp photos. I found myself not needing to reach to my fast aperture lenses as much as I thought I would, which takes a huge burden off when you're going out for quick excursions. It eliminates the need for taking a large bag with you. And that is because, unlike the 18-55, it has the ability to detect when the lens is mounted to a tripod and responds appropriately by disabling that OIS. As anyone who has done long exposure with the 18-55 and forgot to turn off OIS will tell you, this is a very nice addition, but the thing that really seals the deal for me is the close focus ability of this lens. At the tele end, you get a 1:4 reproduction ratio, which improves quite a bit over the 16-55 and the 18-55, which both can only get you a 1:7. So that's a pretty big list of things to love about this lens, and it's absolutely enough to push the 18-55 off of that pedestal that I've always had it on. But is it perfect? Of course not. As we've already said, it's not perfect optically, and it's certainly expensive, especially when you consider that you can get that 18-55 lightly used at a much more manageable price just about anywhere in the world. Because for many people, they buy it in a kit and they sell it immediately. Not so as much with the 16-80. This has just not been flooded the used market as much, so it's really possible to get a great deal on the 18-55. But the biggest issue with this lens is something that particularly is bothersome to us hybrid shooters, and that is that it's strange focus issues when zooming. When zooming, regardless of what focus mode you're using, you can count on this lens temporarily losing focus as you zoom. This is something Fuji has tried to rectify with firmware updates to no avail as of firmware 1.02. It's important to note that no mirrorless camera lens that was designed for photography first and not for videography will stay in focus as you zoom. And that's because these lenses are varifocal lenses, not parfocal lenses. If you want a lens that will perfectly be in focus as you zoom, you'll need to invest in some of Fuji's higher end zoom lenses designed for video, and also forget about run and gun and autofocus. But what we're talking about here is not a varifocal lens issue. what we're talking about is a fundamental design flaw with the 16-80 that makes things look pretty horrible if you plan to do any pushing or pulling of zoom while doing video. As a hobbyist, videographer, and vlogger, I love using zoom as a technique. I enjoy the natural look you can get when you're hand holding while interviewing someone, for instance, by zooming in and out every once in a while, and I find myself doing this quite a bit when filming my family. With this lens, I had to concentrate on not doing this and had to focus on zooming between shots where I was planning the cuts to be. And if something important was happening, I often found myself physically moving my hand off of the lens and onto the body to avoid the temptation to zoom and thus ruin a shot. Now, I'm not going to defend this at all. It's clearly an issue and something I really wish Fuji would have addressed before releasing this very important lens. As they push further and further into the video game with the success of the X-T3, this really was a step in the wrong direction. But I actually felt like not being able to zoom helped my videography in Hawaii, where I had to think harder before hitting that record button about where my focal length was and sticking with it. I guess it sort of felt like shooting with a flexible prime. And really, if you shoot video professionally with Fuji, you already know that zooming is not a good idea for pro work anyway. All Fuji zoom lenses that I've ever tried cause a sort of flickering effect to occur when zooming, and I've always hated that about Fuji and video. So if you plan to shoot video professionally with Fuji, I'd say this lens and really any Fuji X zoom lens can work. Just don't do any push-ins or pullbacks and you'll be fine. Just stick with dolly zooms, guys. But that's all the thoughts I have on this lens. As I've already stated, it has replaced the 18-55 lens for us for travel and vlogging, and I definitely recommend it for general purpose and travel photography. I'll end with just a few other videos and photo examples from our trip at the end, but that's all I have for you. Remember to do some good with your camera, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Calling me home. Calling me home. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for loving me, even though I don't deserve it. Thank you for loving me. Thank you. Give all my love to you, darling. Keep walking. Thank you for loving me. Give all my love to you, darling. Keep walking. Keep shining. Give all my love to you, darling. For loving. Keep walking. Keep shining. Oh, come light a fire, burn like the rising sun. I never thought I'd find